All right, Dale, I got 11 o'clock Eastern my time. Is it okay if I go ahead and get this party started?
Good for me.
All right, cool. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. I guess no matter where you are, except our guest Daryl, he's way out in Spain. We'll talk about that in a second, but I hope you're having a good day. I know it's an early start for some of you, but I so appreciate all of you logging on. And if you're watching the recording, I hope you're having a good day. We're going to be talking about the art of pivoting, how some nonprofits have actually thrived during COVID-19, which is a nice change of pace from some of the doom and gloom we've seen out in the news. So I'm Steven. I'm over here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion as always. And just a couple of housekeeping items real quick. We are recording this session. We'll be sending out the slides and the recording later on today. So if you have to leave early, if you miss a tidbit or just want to watch it again, maybe send it to a friend or a colleague, don't worry, we'll get all that good stuff to you later this afternoon. You won't miss a thing. But most importantly, please feel free to chat in any questions or comments along the way. There's a chat box, there's a Q&A box. We'll keep an eye on both those things. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to try to save some time at the end for Q&A. So don't be shy. Introduce yourself now if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you. You can also do that on Twitter. I'll keep an eye on the tweets there. But yeah, don't be shy. We'd love to know who you are and what your questions are. And if this is your first Bloomerang webinar, just want to say an extra special welcome to you folks. We do these webinars now a couple times a week. We love it. Bring on a great guest, totally educational, informative, oftentimes inspirational. But if you've never heard of Bloomerang, just for context, we are a provider of donor management software. So if you are interested in that, maybe you're looking to switch software this year, check us out, visit our website. There's all kinds of videos on there. You can learn more about us. We're pretty easy to find. But don't do that right now, because you all are in for a real special treat. It is not too often that I get to have a literal living legend on the webinar series, but we are blessed to have my good buddy Daryl Upsall joining us from beautiful Spain. He's in central Spain, usually in Madrid, but he's hunkering down at one of his cottages. Daryl, how you doing? You doing okay?
I'm good. The sun has come out. The sun is shining. It's a blue sky, and yeah, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with y'all.
This is awesome. We owe you such a debt of gratitude for doing this. You actually reached out to us and offered to give this presentation. Very, very generous of you. And then obviously there's a big time zone difference. So thanks for doing this so late in the day where you are, although it sounds like it's not quite nighttime. So that's good. Geez, Daryl, I don't even know where to start.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock here, but I think I'll have to wait till 6 o'clock for my glass of wine.
Okay, good. So we're not delaying the wine or dinner, but this is awesome. Daryl has been a buddy of mine. I actually got a chance to share the stage with him at one of the AFP Icon presentations a couple years ago. Just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, has clients all over the world and definitely has an international view of what's been going on. Has been helping his clients deal with all of this since February, March, even before it hit the US, of course. And I'm just so excited to hear about all the things you've seen and learned. So I'm gonna pipe down. I'll let you share your screen, Daryl, because you got a lot of good stuff for us. Let's see if we can get your slides up. Hopefully it'll work. It was working before.
That's the joy of technology,
right?
There we go. Is that working for you?
Looks like it's thinking about going. Yeah, that looks beautiful. Okay, the floor is yours, my friend. Take it away.
Thank you for that. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Greetings from Spain. I'm going to cover a word that I guess popped up during the course of the COVID crisis, which is pivoting. And I don't mean becoming a ballerina, which certainly wouldn't suit me. But let's just talk about that. So welcome. Pleased to have you here. And a little bit about me. Yeah, 30 odd years, 6 years in the fundraising world, headed up Greenpeace, done some stuff for Mandela for his election, and run a number of agencies out of Spain, digital consulting, recruitment, face-to-face and so forth. I'm a for an agency, all of which have been very impacted by COVID itself, as you'll imagine. These are some of the clients. Maybe some of you are there, have been there, probably even going there. But we work for a lot of the national, international organizations, UN agencies, but also smaller national organizations around the world. And just to give some context, My team at Daryl Upsall Associates, the consulting side, we've been doing studies for the last 20 years of national markets, organizational evaluations. And during this period of COVID, we've been speaking to a lot of our clients across multiple markets, suppliers, funders, and so forth, as well as looking at some of the information coming out in the digital form through blogs and so forth. So just to set a context, I guess most of you are coming in from what would be a mature market, Canada or the USA. These are the trends that were going on pre-COVID in the mature markets, in the darker blue, and the emerging markets, of which there are many, and we work in at the same time. Face-to-face, by that I mean the street fundraising, definitely stable. Digital was already growing, but as we'll see, has boomed as a result of COVID, and those organizations that were there and jumped in stronger have done well. Direct mail, which in most of the world has been going down in recent years, and the US, Canada, Holland, Germany are some of the few markets it remains. Funny enough, had a bit of a kickback in COVID as people actually took time to read the communications they were getting from their donors, especially if they were relevant. Television, for those that can afford it, it's again had a big boost under COVID, even though it's quite stable previously. Corporate fundraising, we'll look at that a little bit, and I'd certainly welcome any input from the audience here. Hasn't really changed. I've been in fundraising 36 years. I don't think the dial has shifted for more than 5% of global fundraising income, private income that is, has come from corporations, hasn't changed much. And they haven't really responded that much collectively in this period. Foundations, they've been growing in all markets, both in private foundations, larger ones, and donor advised funds. And I think they're going to, as we'll come on later, they've got some interesting moves they've made during this period. Major donors, that's been a tough one. High level philanthropy gone up. Harder for us as fundraisers to actually go out and reach them. Legacy income, bequest, plan giving, as you may wish to call it in some parts of the world, that has been growing just because the slow, as opposed to the monumental wealth transfer has been going on across generations. Interest in legacies has definitely gone up enormously during this period. Middle donors, not much done, but either way, not so much affected by this period. Some of my predictions, based on what we've been seeing, reading, etc., is globally, we think in 2020, even though some organizations will do well, globally income will drop between 20 to 30% this year. And next year could be even tougher as people have less resources to ride it out. I also think that 30-40% of the smaller, perhaps local organizations will go under if we continue, and certainly as of today, for example, Madrid got locked down again, and much of the UK and other cities and parts of Europe are being infected by the second rise in COVID, and that makes a lot of the fundraising operations harder. Even some of the bigger, by bigger I'm talking about 100 million plus organizations, are struggling, and we're seeing very, very high levels of layoffs and so forth. And what we've been looking at is organizations most at risk being those with overdependence on single channel fundraising, retail trading. That may not be so big in terms of charity shops or thrift shops, as you may wish to call them. I'd imagine Salvation Army has both had reasons for growing and reasons for contracting during this period. But in the UK, major brands like Oxfam, cancer charities, etc., a good 20% of their income can come from high street trading. And when the high streets close, there is no trading. Likewise with gala events, community fundraising. Having said that, and we'll show an example from Australia, organizations that have pivoted have found a way of dealing with that too. I assume most of you will have seen the AFP Canada, AFP USA research on on the coronavirus response survey. If not, I really encourage you to do so. It's there on the website and pretty easy to find. But if you look at the expectations, only 11% expect to grow more than 2009, but in Canada, 70% less. And only 30% are going to do more fundraising activity, 39% normal, a lot less. So decline in activity, similar in the US, but I think feel less optimistic, shall we say. Only half expect to drop, only half. Sounds terrible after years of slow growth in income from fundraising. What's been changing is a massive increase in donor retention and stewardship, which for somebody who's banged on about supporter relationship development, donor-centered fundraising, monthly giving for many, many years, this is great to hear, because I think that is the for fundraising for many organizations. Social media, virtual, online, email, all gone up hugely and effectively. And again, when we come to pivoting, I think these are key factors. Canada, even more on donor retention and stewardship. And this is an example of, I think, the kind of low level but general market pivoting that if people can do it, organizations can shift into it, is going to make the difference of growth, survival, and if not, failure. The ultra high net worth, some have stepped up to the plate. 8 billion from corporations is no small sum. This is definitely 8 billion of COVID related donations, not related to their other typical financial support for the sector. Having said that, it's hard to measure where money has been either diverted from supporting, for example, cultural activities that they would have supported and shifted into COVID. Ultra high net worth, 1.5 billion. But if you look at, and I'm sure many of you have, the wealth growth of the ultra high net worth individuals in the world during COVID, it has been phenomenal. And just look at the owner of Amazon for that one. He's doubled his wealth value in the period of COVID, more or less. Foundations, particularly in the US, have taken a really positive move, and I think it's one of the areas of our business where we should be thankful. And they have definitely, I would say, in my words, pivoted. The speed at which 800 foundations suddenly speeded up their grant giving processes, the fact that many of them are giving more this year, the Skull, Mary Reynolds, etc., double or quadrupling giving. But then again, is it reaching across everywhere? No, for sure. We're seeing a fallback in all kinds of funding, including foundations for the arts, culture, which, while it might be seen as non-essential, if you think about the mental health and the social well-being of our society as a whole, I think we need to think beyond purely medical and social welfare. I think we thrive when we have external beauty around us, shall we say. UK situation pretty much largely the same as the US and Canada. 27% income has declined, but what was surprising is 40% there said income had increased in a big survey done by the equivalent of the AFP, the Institute of Fundraising, along with Blackboard in the UK. Probably more confidence, I'd say, in the UK when the survey was done that recovery will happen and that new ways will be found to combat the challenges. I think probably one of the bigger differences is in much of Europe, UK in particular, non-profits have had financial support, whether it's paying wages during furloughing for many months, or some specific funds, and not insignificant, actually funding into the sector itself to keep them going. But again, that bottom line, there's 29%, almost 30% that think they will not do well during the lockdown. At that point, I open up for any questions. Steve, I don't know whether you are collecting questions through the chat box and want to throw any at me, or we want to hold questions and answers to the end.
We
adding new
are
players.
collecting, but there haven't been any yet. So I'd say keep going. We can get to them at
Keep
the
going.
end.
Okay, please.
it-
I encourage you to put some questions into the chat box, and we'll take them as they come in at the Q&A point. And I see Jessica's raised a hand. Great. So let's go on to the art of pivoting. And what is it? Well, as I said to Steve earlier, be prepared. It's a Boy Scout motto from Baden Powell. My middle name's Baden, so I've got some legitimacy in using this slogan. And it's not just for Scouts. I'm not sure how many of you in the session today, with some regularity, I'd argue, say, on an annual basis at least, do a pestle analysis of your organization, which is looking at the political, economic, social, technological, environment, and legal environment your organization is operating in. So, for example, for colleagues in the US, you're clearly a month away, more or less, from an election. That has an impact of the political outcome, but it also has an impact in terms of monies going into political campaigns, election funds, and so forth, that may not be at this time of year typically going to you. Environmental issues, many organizations are impacted, as I definitely was working in this area at Greenpeace. If you're in some areas of activity, the environmental changes that are going on will impact upon your work. It's good to do this, but then we got COVID, and that was not in any of the pestle analysis we have done for our clients over the last few years on markets or their organization. So what did COVID-19 bring up as organizational issues to review? And here's some of the key ones. What we have seen is it really raises issues about governance of organizations, small and large, and the speed of decision making. I think the worst side of governance we've observed is organizations where the board have instructed the management team to say no fundraising activity, no additional investment at this time, because that will die. People aren't ready for it. Nobody wants to give at this time. COVID is a problem. It's also impacted on how we work. Clearly, working from home is a different way of working than normal. So therefore, it raises issues about how well is your organization in the cloud. We had to, with our telephone call center in Spain, we had to suddenly move 200 employees from Friday to a Monday from working in a call center to working at home. It worked perfectly. We didn't lose any call time. Why? Because we'd gone to the cloud. I think during times like this, leadership and motivation. Why did the call center, in our case, double the amount of money raised, double the amount of calls made in the first 6 months to the same 6 months last year? Because the leadership of that company was incredibly motivational, made videos every day. All callers were allowed to make videos which were shared. I don't know, keeping organizations happy and strong during crisis is important. What was very important we've seen for organizations is to look at how you make investment decisions. A lot of organizations set their budgets 1 year ahead or for the previous financial year. Those organizations that could literally tear up their budget and say, okay, we're going to start again. This is a different situation. Human resource issues, you can imagine. Travel, people like me, 150 days on the road meeting clients. I haven't left the country since COVID. So what did the organizations that are growing do? Yesterday, I was in contact with my colleague at UNHCR, the global head of fundraising there, Christian Chaki. And he told me that UNHCR, the refugee agency, had a 20% increase in their income this year. We're talking about a $500 million, $600 million organization. Now, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, the Red Cross, Red Crescent, you would expect to grow because they are delivering vital services, supporting people with the virus. Having said that, we have a client, Smile Train, both in the UK and in the US, they have seen a huge lift in their income during the COVID crisis. They deal with, for those that don't know, Smart Train, they deal with cleft palate operations, not connected, if you like. So what have these organizations done? They've ramped up their social media and digital work. They've invested in direct response TV. As we've seen from those statistics, they have been throwing a lot of resources at donor loyalty and taking one-off donors to monthly donors. They've been taking their monthly donors, their sustainers for people in America, USA, and upgrading their monthly gift. And interesting, as I mentioned earlier, investing heavily in legacy marketing. That investment came because they saw a spike in the data requests for legacy, plan giving, bequest, fundraising, and therefore said, okay, let's throw more money at it. If there's more interest, more for us. This is an interesting one, and I think we're seeing it at the international level or national offices of international organizations. They're looking at the failing organizations in their market, struggling organizations, and looking to merge or even in some form acquire. Where there might be 10 organizations providing a service, say, to children in a region or a country, they say maybe we merge with the two smaller ones who look to be struggling. I think the other issue to look at is, and I'm sure all of you have had these discussions at some point in your career, how big a reserve should your organization have? Is it 3 months operating reserve? Is it more? If you've got large reserves, do you keep them for security or do you start pulling into them? And we've seen both. We've seen organizations saying, actually, we keep our reserves because we know this is for the long term. But I have to say the ones that have significantly grown have been saying, okay, now is the time to go to reserves and invest in growth areas of fundraising, primarily digital, I would argue. This is a client of ours in Australia, Fred Hollows Foundation. It's the best known eye health organization. It does operations on cataracts in much of Asia, for example, parts of Africa. And it normally has a fun run, a sort of mini marathon raising money for its cause. It's a very well known organization named after its deceased founder, Fred's Big Run. But of course, if anybody's been following the news, Sydney and Melbourne, two big cities there, were locked down. So they took their actual run to become a virtual run. Result was, instead of raising $250,000 Australian dollars, which would be their typical income from that event, by going online, they ramped up their income to 1.6 million. So it makes us rethink about virtual events versus real events. I'm sure the real one will come back in time. Virtual concerts. I'm sure some of you donated, watched as we did. It was a global virtual conference. We could watch it here in Spain. And it raised money. Again, drawing back to where we've been picking up our information, it's from these sources, studying, researching. Okay, so we've mentioned already decision making, moving reserves, and the other thing is switching budgets and switching human resources. So one of the most exciting things, well, we were supposed to be having the first ever international face-to-face fundraising conference in Vienna in November next month. Clearly it couldn't happen, so we've had to go virtual. We've done one virtual, we have another one coming up. What was interesting, working with all of the global heads of the major international brand NGOs, UN agencies, is how they had their thousands of face-to-face staff. I mean, tens of thousands. Face-to-face is the biggest single fundraising tool in the world these days in terms of donor acquisition. And actually, instead of just having them at home doing nothing, they had them using their own social media, working on telephone, fundraising, calling donors they had personally recruited in the street or in a shopping mall and asking them how they were and talking about their cause and thanking them for their support, which is pretty amazing in my mind. Pivoting a face-to-face fundraiser into a telephone fundraiser. We did the same in Spain. Our face-to-face teams couldn't go out. They went into the call centers, and shall we just say they were perhaps a little over enthusiastic compared to telephone fundraisers, but they brought in the results for the clients. The other characteristic of those doing well was how and when to change your message. It was very easy to keep the COVID message running. In fact, we were, as a company, we had it on our website, we had it in our signatures for our emails. We set up a COVID resource center for free resources for charities wishing to read, look at, see during the crisis. But then there is a point to drop it. And what was very interesting from many of the international clients was how quickly they were moving the message and back to their core mission, and making sure that actually the COVID-19 message did not dominate, because at the end of the day, I'm sure everybody on this call and this presentation eventually gets a little bit fed up with it. And yes, you do need to hear about other issues around the world. So in the UK, fundraisers changed completely how they communicate with their sustainer regular donors. They focused again on stewardship, more telephone thanking, more offering payment holidays or reduced gifts. And again, even for monthly donors, more use of digital, using social media to reinforce the message of what they were doing. A good call, definitely a good call. I don't know how many on the call, and I'll be happy to have a discussion about that later. Actually, during the crisis, tried to call all of the donors at different levels. Even if it's just to say, how are you? And thank you. We really appreciate your continuous support. And again, as I mentioned earlier, direct mail came back. In even the UK, where it's pretty moribund, apart from maybe the very older part of the donor support base. But looking to the future, a lot of people were not skilled up enough to go digital. Their board, in many cases, did not fully understand that some things about digital it's viral, it's out of your control. Your supporters can be putting out messages to seek support. And obviously we saw in many cases, I know in the US it's not so big, but in Canada, face-to-face is huge. Stopping that was a big impediment. So again, pivoting an organization's face-to-face investment and people into telephone or other channels like DRTV or digital was critical. We'll skip through that. It's not surprising that these were the good channels, but now I think we have some questions. So let's hear some of those. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, we got some good ones.
Great.
Thanks, Daryl. This was cool to get some flavor for what's been going on elsewhere in the world, because it seems like you folks over the pond are always a couple months ahead of us over here. So things to look forward to, I suppose.
Including with the virus, sadly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Italy came first, or China.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
so much of what you said, we saw reflected in at least our customers. We saw a lot of people calling donors. Obviously the stewardship came up a lot. Got a question here specifically about what to do instead of the face-to-face. I'm wondering if you can maybe pull on that thread a little bit. They're a small nonprofit, can't do face-to-face meetings. Is it phone calls? Is it video chats? Is it social media? Are those, you think, the things that can, certainly replace those in-person meetings?
I think the question relates to face-to-face more in terms of major donors or people who
sounds
normally
like
directly meet, not mass fundraising.
Right.
One of the most exciting things I've seen people doing during this period is actually setting up WhatsApp groups with donors, but not just one-to-one, seeing if donors would like to join in on a shared WhatsApp chat group or a shared WhatsApp call with video. And in a sense, it's almost like a mini donor advice fund, but because of the so much isolation that has been related to COVID, to give an example, in Spain, we were not allowed to leave our homes for 3 months, period. Right. You could get medicine, you could get food. Otherwise, you were fined $1,000.
Wow.
It's as simple as that. My wife never left the house for 3 months at all. So actually putting people into groups, asking people if they'd like to join a WhatsApp group where you can be sort of sharing, asking questions, or joining a Zoom conference group call, certainly has helped, because what we've found is that donors tend to reinforce each other, enthusiastic collectively. I think part of the challenge also of trying to set up too many one-to-one Zoom calls is people got zoomed out.
Yeah.
I use Zoom as a generic term. It's almost like, it's become the conference call. It could be any type of system. And therefore, actually, what you're asking was something they go, oh, God, no, not another one.
Right.
So I think you have to be very careful. And I think having more dial-in activities. So one of the things I've always liked for years, and it's been re-emphasized, is people like MSF Canada, interesting, many years ago, started with me, inviting me to go into a live chat with somebody in South Sudan in a medical facility.
Oh, wow.
And they will be there with their cell phone, and there'll probably be 50 of us joining the chat. And he or she will be explaining what they're doing in a really terrible situation, and literally move the camera around and show you what's going on around them.
Wow.
And then you could ask questions. That kind of thing, I think, interactive, but not zoom, 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 zoom. Oh, sorry, I've fallen asleep.
Right. And hearing from a service recipient or, your work out in the field, that seems to be the key, right?
I think that's much more interesting is again, we'll come up to a bit later, showing impact, showing what you're really doing, not kind of smooth talking.
I love it. And the small groups of donors, is that like maybe 10, 12 donors that you got?
Yeah. Probably not much more than that, just to give people time, because you set a limit, and probably even half an hour is sufficient, because, I'm sure we've all even found it. Oh my God, it's my best friend, but do I really want to go on another call at 8 o'clock at night?
I know. I feel it.
So also the beauty of a group is it takes a little bit of the responsibility off the single individual for being too on.
Good point.
Yep. Next question.
Here's one that spawned from your pestle slide. So, here in the States, we got the election coming up in about 33 days, I think. It seems like there's a lot of things that can distract you from fundraising, or maybe, talk yourself out of asking. Is that an exception, or is that something that maybe you could perhaps capitalize on? I feel like, people are going to be fired up on both sides of the aisle, no matter who wins. You've obviously dealt with a lot of elections in a lot of different countries.
Yeah.
What should people be thinking about there?
I think that it's an excellent question, because it depends entirely on your mission.
Okay.
But things happen in the political world that then roll on into economic and everything else. But for example, the appointment of a certain Supreme Court judge in the USA is certainly going to impact upon people like Planned Parenthood. So, you'd be looking at your news thinking, even if that is possibly coming down the line, that's a reason for ramping up your fundraising on particular issues that, an incoming Supreme Court judge may not be sympathetic to.
Right.
So I think you've got to be two things: looking at your own internal political world and how that may be impacted. But for other organizations, it's what's happening in the external political world. So, if you're Amnesty International right now, the politics of being banned in India, which they've just been banned and made illegal after, many attacks from the government there, means no doubt that political impact in India is going to be the cause for additional support, for appeals for support in the rest of the world. Like, who's got the right to close down Amnesty in the world's biggest democracy? Because that's what India is. 1 billion people vote. So, I've worked in political fundraising all my life, but the politics largely has been around cause politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think always keep a track on what might impact upon your cause. And if it's not impacted, then stick to your core mission, because that can be a distraction otherwise.
That makes sense. We've had a couple people, Daryl, talk about celebrity endorsements, getting celebrities involved in maybe your campaigns. Is that something you've seen be successful? And, I think celebrity is a term that has a pretty broad definition. I've seen local orgs here in Indianapolis utilize local celebrities, people that maybe
Yeah,
wouldn't be
absolutely.
known outside the town. But is that seems like something that they could leverage?
I think the classic thing in celebrities, and as you well know, I managed all of Elton John's philanthropy and set up his foundation for him, and worked with many of managed all the Freddie Mercury Queen stuff when he died.
Yeah.
Celebrity can be a two-edged sword. So one, you've got to be very careful about who you choose to make sure they're not the coke snorting, adulterizing,
Right.
perhaps religious evangelist that
Sure.
is your endorser. I mean, in terms of, you've really got to be very careful. Having said that, even in the heart of the peak period of COVID, one of our clients called Animals Asia, based out of Hong Kong, but an animal welfare organization, has just launched a global campaign using celebrities, Ricky Gervais being one of them.
Hmm.
It's a kind of a love-hate figure, I'd argue. But also lots of Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean celebrities. And boy, the impact has skyrocketed upon them because they're getting reposted. And it's very simple. They wanted to change their message from "we hate people who harm animals," anger, hate, to "love conquers all," basically. Celebrities have put out that message from all over the world, and I say Animals Asia, we're in discussions with them right now. They're seeing an absolutely boom, including in markets where they were not having such an impact, like China, which is hard to breach that communications wall. So, but I think for the smaller organizations, definitely, local radio, celebrities and so forth, all good. If you can be really sure you're not going to get caught in some celebrity boob trap.
Right. You don't want a PR disaster because of it.
No.
You mentioned major gift fundraising, at least on the higher end, is up quite a bit. Obviously there's a lot of wealth disparity, but is there a way that the average small to medium sized nonprofit can tap into that somehow, or does it just come down to building relationships with the people you have? What do you think there?
As everybody on this call knows, there's no quick fix there. I think one of the most important things, if you are stewarding your existing wealthy major donors, is to definitely make sure you've done due diligence that, for example, their wealth might be increasing. Maybe they're in the home food delivery business and they are booming, and this is just the right time to ask them for a bigger gift. On the other hand, they might be at the other end. My son's a top chef, and the restaurant business, shall we say, in much of the world has fallen through the floor as people aren't going out to dine. So I think you should always, like everything with major donors, you should always make sure you know enough about what's going on in people's lives before approaching, whether that's if they've been affected directly by COVID, for example, through a family member, and therefore maybe thinking of other things, or, like I say, their business is booming or busting. Just take those facts into account before approaching them.
And it's a good point about maybe corporate fundraising, because there are a lot of businesses doing well, right? I mean, you mentioned, I think of maybe like cleaning service companies.
Yep.
It seems like that's an opportunity as well, especially if you already have those relationships, right?
Yeah, and I think that doesn't necessarily go to a lot of those cleaning companies. Funny if we had our sofas cleaned the other day. We spoke to the guy, and house business, it's booming. Everybody wants their house, their hospital, their hotel, their whatever cleaned, and they're booming. They're a small business, but small local businesses that are doing well, I'm sure would like to put back into the community. I think those of your donors that are having a hard time, it's also good to reach out with them, but reach out thanking them for their past support and wishing them well in these challenging times. Nobody will regret you saying thank you, that's for sure.
I love it. We were talking, Daryl, earlier, and you mentioned in one of your slides about kind of the board getting out of the way, or maybe leadership in general, whether it's your boss or a board member. What advice would you have for organizations where maybe they're getting that message from above that's saying, hey, we shouldn't fundraise, there's too much going on in the world, we're not the right cause type, which I think is a bunch of malarkey personally. But
Yeah.
what should those people do who are feeling kind of stuck, like they want to fundraise, but they're getting roadblocked from above?
I would go and find as many local case studies or case studies relevant to your cause and say, hey, look what they're doing. They're raising a lot of money in this difficult time, and they're in the same business as us. So if you're one of the areas that's boomed during this period is animal welfare.
Yeah,
or dog shelters, or
absolutely.
things like that. But try to find the success stories in your community and then have that story told to your board. Look for the evidence that's there. It's out there, published. It's in reports and blogs about donors not feeling offended by being contacted and thanked and asked for support, because your mission is still vital. I mean, I think, again, culture is really hard. Imagine you're a local theater or a local orchestra and you can't perform, so you've got no revenue through the door.
Yeah.
Again, I think if you're in that area, you shouldn't feel guilty about going and say, culture's a key part of our community. We need to continue and thrive. We will continue to be doing our virtual program or putting on socially safe activities, but we need more support than ever. There's nothing wrong in going out and asking, but I think most boards are convinced by example.
Yes. And if anyone needs any of those case studies or donor research, I got them all. So just email me. I'll send them to your board for you.
Fabulous.
I got it.
Fabulous.
Including some of the things in the slides that Daryl had. Can we talk capital campaigns for a minute? Seems like maybe some people are in the middle of them. They were thinking of starting one. Should they stop? Should they keep going forward? What do you think there? I know there's a lot of different situations, but
wow, that's a really difficult one.
Yeah,
because I think even every capital campaign has its own uniqueness to it, and
right.
I think what you've always got to be doing is testing your case for support, because things may change in time. Things may be, the urgency for a capital campaign can rise or fall depending on the issue. I found myself in the middle of the last pandemic. I was working for the leading HIV/AIDS charity in Europe and the UK called the Terence Higgins Trust. And we were launching capital campaigns and then Freddie Mercury's, the Queen actually wanted to build the Freddie Mercury Memorial Hospital wing.
Oh, wow.
With the concert that we did at Wembley, which was an awareness raiser, but the re-release of Bohemian Rhapsody, which we benefited from. And I found myself as a 30-year-old banging the table in front of the members of Queen saying, we don't need it because this pandemic of HIV/AIDS is going to be over because we have drugs now.
Oh.
And I persuaded them to change, to give it to help people living with AIDS and prevention of future spread of AIDS. Read the text that I wrote at the back of Bohemian Rhapsody. So I just think, again, it's the circumstance. It's whether it still holds true. Do you still need that extra facility at your concert hall when something else is happening?
Yeah,
it's a tough one. I don't think there's an easy answer.
It's a tough one. We would need hours to cover it fully.
Yeah.
That's okay. You mentioned political giving, spiking over the next month or so, and in previous months here, at least in the States. How should people navigate the fact that maybe, I think you said this, that some of that money that might be going towards charitable causes is now going towards candidates? Is it all that money? Is there still enough to go around? It seems like, if you can still make a compelling case that you could still, capture some of that money. But what do you think?
I mean, let's be frank. I think we knew 4 years ago there was going to be another election.
Right.
So, if that's not part of your strategic analysis, every 4 years there's going to be elections for the president. There's going to be midterms, whatever your system is. Bear in mind, in North America, especially USA, it's a very different model to Europe, where I think the maximum you can spend on a candidate in the UK is £2,000.
Oh, okay.
So political fundraising just doesn't count in most of Europe, so in Australia and so forth. It's not driven by money. And in fact, in some countries, the state pays all the costs of elections. So But I mean, these things are predictable. So if you haven't factored it in, why not? It goes back to the pestle, I think.
Yep.
Should we? I've got a few more slides. Should we move on and take some
Yeah,
more
why don't we move on?
questions at the end?
I think we exhausted the questions for now, but yeah, let's keep going.
Well, we can still pull them back in if they haven't.
Yeah.
Why is my screen frozen? Oh,
there it goes.
Where was I? So, yeah, so more pestle, more risk assessment, more preparation, more reasons why my... So key findings for the future. Let's just go to the final run here. First of all, don't hide from the problem. This duck and dive, lot of fan of it. Get out. I think we have to persuade upwards if we're in a junior position. If we're the CEO, we may even have to persuade downwards and say to our development fundraising staff, come on, guys, this isn't the reason for not doing, so go for it. Act fast and be decisive. And I think our message going upwards to boards is prepare the case strong early. Don't say, oh, wait for them. Oh, we've got a board meeting coming in 3 months. We'll review it then. No, that either needs to be an emergency board meeting or most likely anyway, a virtual emergency board meeting. Stick to your mission. I've mentioned that before. 4 paws, pretty much all the animal welfare organizations we work with have boomed, and they've hardly mentioned COVID because that's not what they're there to do. Thinking to the future, are you prepared for next time? What's the next crisis that could hit your organization? Okay, we're going to have to live through the pandemic. We're going to have to wait till there's a medical resolution somehow. But what's really important, I think, in this crisis is to document what we got wrong and what we got right and how to prepare for the future. Most of us who've worked in big international organizations which are high in the media, we have to do this planning typically, at Greenpeace, about media scandals, attacks, crisis. What if one of our ships does something, So there are emergency communications protocols and stuff in place. How quick can we turn around a fundraising appeal if a crisis is affecting us either positively or negatively? Ken Burnett, who's a guru of fundraising in the world, had a deal with Greenpeace UK back in the 90s that they could turn around a direct mail appeal, a newspaper advert, and any other form of media we had then within 24 hours, 48 hours over a weekend. Then literally the staff would come in and do the copy, the design, and in the packs, the envelopes were already pre-ready to be stuffed. You've got to be fast. There's no good waiting 3 months. They say, oh, we should have done something about that. Introduce flexible fundraising. Actually, interestingly, a lot of the international organizations have started over the last 5-10 years to get rid of the silos. So somebody's no longer in donor acquisition, direct mail as one area, they're actually in the whole donor experience. People can move between channels. They're not stuck in one role. People know that in certain times, their role as for example, face-to-face fundraiser on the street is now going to pivot and change into a telephone fundraiser. You've got to be able to do that and have the structures and the human resource programs in place to do that. You can't switch everybody to home working if people haven't got a space to work at home. How do you deal with that? Keep testing, because this is new. We've had pandemics, but not pandemics that have affected us in this way for fundraising before. Again, going back to monthly giving. Monthly giving is the savior. Those people paying every month through their bank accounts, through their credit cards, $20, $15, whatever, they will stay with you. There is no strong evidence of those types of donors leaving organizations, and in fact, enough evidence to say they're increasing their gifts if properly asked and stewarded. The digital transformation, like many people have said, we've compressed 6 years into 6 months during this period of COVID. I think now you need to be planning how fast can you transform into a digital organization. Committee donors, tell your mission, communicate impact. people may think you've stopped activity. You haven't. I was listening to a representative of the British zoos, and marine places today on the radio. Of course, they've still been running their breeding programs. They've still been feeding their animals. They've still been doing the research and support to make sure animals don't go into extinction. But they have to communicate that, because people aren't going to those venues under lockdown until they open today in the UK, to get their true work across. So really keep telling people what you do. Keep saying thank you. Even things like a little handwritten note, maybe, because you've got people furloughed. Why aren't people at home writing handwritten notes and just sending to donors through the office, obviously? Give donors choice. Let donors during a crisis make it clear to them they can control their payments. If they are having a problem financially, that, hey, take a holiday. If this is too much, take a downsizing of your monthly gift. Speak to your donors and call them just to find out how they are coping and what they would like from you. I always think of telephone fundraising. It's why I never, ever use the word telemarketing. Even though I'm a pioneer of telephone fundraising, telemarketing is not what we do. Telephone fundraising is much more about listening, communicating, hearing what the donors have to say. I would say if you're not diversified in your fundraising in terms of channels and mix, you need to be. Keep testing and keep reading those benchmarks. I'm sure at Bloomerang, you've got loads of data people could look at that would benefit from and could put into their cases for support internally for increased investment in certain areas and channels. And on that note, I say, muchas gracias. And to quote a president who dealt with perhaps the biggest crisis the US has faced, indeed the world faced, Franklin D. Roosevelt, I love this quote: the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So thank you. And questions?
I love it. We owe you our thanks, Daryl. You've graciously offered to do this for us out of the blue. I so appreciated getting that email from you a few months back. This was awesome. What a treat. And thanks for doing this near dinner time for you. I want to keep it.
No, this isn't Spanish dinner time. This is the end of Spanish lunchtime.
Okay. Yeah.
Spanish
I got to get on that
time's 9
schedule. That
o'clock.
sounds a lot better. Well, I know you've got a lot going on. You're talking to the UN tomorrow. I mean, geez, yeah. Totally normal thing, no big deal. But we're getting some chats in here thanking you for the session. Any thoughts you want to leave us to part with? I know we answered a lot of the questions already, but
I'd happy to take more questions. I think, have we still got 5 minutes, or is that?
Yeah, we got some time. I'll let people chime in if they want. Somebody was asking about WhatsApp. That's more of I think that's more popular in Europe than in the States, but I think you said it's something like Zoom is probably alternative.
It's just how you send text messages, but without text messages, and you can share images and videos, and you form groups. So in Spain, I think more people use WhatsApp than email, than use text or any other form of chat.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's a global app. I don't know where it originated from. Except when you go to China and they look at your phone and they go, what's that? Oh, that's so old-fashioned.
Well, speaking of the phone, I remember when we were talking at AFP Icon, you mentioned that it seems like mobile fundraising in general is a lot bigger in Europe than it is here in the States, except in the cases of maybe, maybe disaster response. So some people are asking, what about texting donors? Is that something you're seeing, be effective right now?
You know what? Texting died some years ago, I think, in Europe.
Really?
Well, I'm sure it's sometimes used, but WhatsApp and things are much more popular. To be frank, I mean, even an old boy like me who's about to be 60 next week, we've pretty much abandoned landlines. Nobody in Europe really uses a landline for anything. And all of you communicate with your 86-year-old mother-in-law through WhatsApp, not through any other means. The cell phone is, when we do face-to-face, we don't care if people have no landline, no address, no nothing. The only thing we want is an email and a cell phone number. And that's pretty much true all over the world now. And in Asia, nobody uses email. I mean, even my son's generation, he's 26. Email is, oh God, why do you use that? So yeah, you've got to be on the cell phone. It's all there.
Interesting. Couple questions here. One from Merrill. They are primarily a fee-based organization, so maybe they're performing arts. I'm not sure, but they want to move into individual fundraising. And you mentioned some of those culture organizations. How should they pivot? Is it people that used to buy tickets to performances simply asking them to donate? Is that kind of a good starting point? What have you seen work there?
I think if possible, you can do activity. Let's talk about the cultural sector. If you are an organization that can still put on a classical concert and people can live stream, but maybe it's the artist solo in their houses. Strangely, I got locked down, and one of our neighbors is one of the world's top cellists, was meant to be playing the Sydney Opera House the next week and LA the week after. And a lot of those people, what they ended up doing was performing online through YouTube and so forth. I think one of the things I did notice, and I actually wrote to the head of the National Theatre, Director of Development, is the National Theatre in the UK, which has fabulous theatre, and they did loads of amazing performances. They put out live streaming, and you're allowed to donate to. You clicked on donate, and it was like the worst back office I've ever seen in my life. So much so, the only way to donate was to buy a ticket as a donation. I said, no, I don't want 3 seats. But that's what the donation drove you to. So I think one of the first things to do is to make sure you are able to take online donations and able to take payments, whether it's through PayPal or whatever, for virtual events. The other thing I'd really suggest, and I haven't checked today, but use Facebook Fundraiser. If you've got no resources, use Facebook Fundraiser. My birthday is next week. I put up a Facebook Fundraiser 2 weeks ago for an organization that rescues people who are migrants on these rubber dinghies in the Mediterranean. Thousands of whom drowned.
I gotta donate to that.
Yeah, I set a target of 1,200 euros. It hit 800 euros. It's hitting 1,500.
Oh, wow!
We'll hit 3,500, like $4,000. Cost to the organization, a tiny charity with no fundraising staff, nothing.
I love it. I'm going to look up your profile. Make sure. Somehow I missed that. I feel bad, Daryl. You put it up last week.
Yeah, you should. You should. Anybody look at it? Daryl Upsall. I'm on Facebook. Hit that donation button. But the good thing is it's free for tiny organizations as long as you can get registered with Facebook and you are legal and legitimate.
Yep. Yeah. I can't log onto Facebook without seeing at least one of those. I wish I'd seen yours, but I'll donate when we get down here for your birthday.
For my 60th birthday. That would have
60?
been
Dang, that's awesome.
16th on the 12th of October.
Well, we're getting close to the noon hour here. There are some questions we didn't get to, but how can people find out more about you? We see your website here on the screen, but is there a good way to get in touch with you?
Easiest is to go to the website, which is www.darylupsall.com. The other way is I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter at Daryl Upsall, and I am on LinkedIn.
Okay, and Facebook.
And just Google Daryl Upsall, because I can tell you what, nobody else on this planet has such a stupid name.
Aw, we like it. You're easy to find, which is what I like about you, and very generous.
It's unique.
So thanks for doing this. This was really a treat to hear what's going on across the ocean, but also, what some things we need to be paying attention to here as well. So thanks for doing this, Daryl. This is fun.
My pleasure. And I wish everybody every success. I wish you good health, safety. And thank you again, Steve, for giving me the chance to be on this call.
I love it. And I found your fundraiser, so I'm going to do that.
There you go. How much
now y'all know the last 4 digits to my card. That's probably not good.
Shit. I'll turn my head away.
That's okay. There's not much money in there. But hey, this is awesome. Like I said, we're going to send the slides and the recording later on today. And we got some cool webinars coming up next week. My buddy Valerie Harris is going to talk about donor retention on the 7th, 1 p.m. Eastern. Check it out. We got other topics. We got a leadership topic coming up. We got some cool stuff coming up through, I think, almost February we're scheduled. So we'd love to see you on another session. But look for an email from me with all the goodies from today. Definitely reach out to Daryl. you'll want to follow his stuff because he's obviously a wealth of knowledge. Daryl, go get a glass of wine. You earned it.
I love it.
I hope you
Have a
stay
great
healthy.
day, everybody.
Yeah, stay safe, and all of you out there. Hope you have a good year end if we don't talk again soon, but hopefully we'll see you on another session. So have a good rest of your Thursday.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.
And thank you for all the chats. We've got some lovely feedback there.
Good group.
Ciao.
See ya.